Shall we begin?
Why not? Welcome to Frankie Sense and More. It's like she's got a whole lot of goodness for you with a little bit of sass.
Frankie, did you just say?
She sure did. Not to mention, along with...
Whoops.
Join us now as Frankie Picasso and her new co-host mix it up with authors, musicians, and interviews with world-changing people.
Let's begin now.
Okay, let's begin now, because it only makes sense.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to Frankie Sense and More. It's been a while. We've taken the summer off. I had my wonderful granddaughter Emma was born, and I'm so excited today to introduce you to some amazing folks that I'm fortunate enough to meet every week. Guests like my guest today, Stephanie Welch. She's a filmmaker extraordinaire. Stephanie is a documentarian and executive director of Paragon Media. She is which is a nonprofit media organization that co-produced A Dangerous Idea-Eugenics, Genetics, and the American Dream, of which Stephanie is the director, producer, and co-writer of said film. She's also the senior producer, of the award-winning syndicated program Pioneers Radio, Revolution from the Heart of Nature, and she co-produced the radio documentary BioWars, First Do No Harm, which actually won the National Federation of Community Broadcasters Silver Reel Award. And she is also an audio ranger. I can't even speak now. Oh my gosh, it's been too long. She's an audio engineer for Women Rising Radio. Wow, and she's joining me today on the Good Radio Network. Brent Marchand should be here, and I expect that he will be. You all know him as the Good Radio Network correspondent, movie correspondent. And for those who don't know me, and I can't imagine who you might be, I'm your host, Frankie Picasso, and welcome to our show today. Wow. Stephanie, it's obvious that you're a humanitarian, an activist, a fifth dimensional thinker. And when I look at all the projects that you're involved in, the social impact is huge for you. And I think it is as big for you as it is for me. And so I kind of, before I deep dive into this film, which I think is amazing, let's get to know who you are for a moment. Where did you grow up? What did you want to be when you were a kid, and all that other cool stuff?
Well, I grew up in Kentucky originally. We moved around quite a bit around the country.
Where in Kentucky?
It's Western Kentucky, so near the land between the lakes. Murray is where I went to college. First started going to college and high school and everything.
Nice.
And then, but then I'd had the California fever, and I left when I was 17 and came out to California. But when I think back, it's like all of these times that I felt like I was a producer. I was constantly producing news shows and things when I was little, and interviewing people. And
so you always wanted to be you wanted to be in the movies or on air, or what did you think you wanted to do?
Well, at that point, I didn't even know you could make movies until I was in college. It was radio and TV was all I knew about, And then I got to Humboldt State, actually, in Arcata, California. And that's where I was introduced on the curriculum to Super 8 films and things like that, and documentary. And I was like, what? And so
you're hooked.
I think I took all film classes in audio production and just didn't do any, regular general ed. I just jumped right into it, and I've enjoyed it.
It's so interesting because I grew up in Canada mostly, and then when I was 13, we moved to Kentucky. So I went to high school in Louisville, Kentucky, the first year of desegregation. So it was,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I was in this very wealthy white high school, which was, I'd come from a little private school of like 12 kids in a room, 2,000 kids, right? Like 200 in our English class. First year desegregation, I had no idea what was going on. And all I knew, they were busing these black kids in, and everybody was all in a uproar. And it was crazy. It was crazy. This movie just meant so much to me because it just reminded me of that time so much. And, we in Canada, because it's so diverse and our culture is all around diversity, racism wasn't rampant like it is, in the US. And so I had never really experienced true racism before I moved to Louisville. And like you, I wanted to go into, journalism, photojournalism. And I moved to St. Louis, and there it was like 10 times even worse. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how crazy is this? So did you always was activism a part of who you were, like saving things or wanting to make right wrongs, or?
I don't know. I think justice was always sort of the, fairness and everything. I think was always a big thing for me.
Yeah.
Up.
Yeah.
I didn't like bullies. I didn't like, people getting picked on, and when things weren't fair, it drove me a little crazy, But I think it wasn't until college where I really started understanding that you could get involved and do things that could help change, politically and everything like
Yeah,
that.
I think my first interview was Jesse Jackson and I was in university, and I'm like, oh my God, look at this, I mean, it was crazy. It was so exciting. And I guess here in Canada, I shouldn't say there was no racism, because when you look at the Aboriginal, hey, they were displaced, and like that's like the biggest thing that you could ever do to people, almost, except steal them from Africa and bring them over here to work for you. It's crazy, really. So
history in Canada about Indigenous peoples, and as we talk about in the film, with sterilization, and a lot of these things happen in Canada too.
They do, and and I realized in Alberta it was like a really awful place to live, even up until the 70s. So the idea in this film that I look at you and I think you're an intelligent woman, I'm an intelligent woman, and the people in this film are very intelligent people, and yet they think very differently from you and I in terms of women, are always going to be less than men. Blacks, are feeble-minded, or these silly ideas that came about when eugenics and the idea of genetics are predisposition us to thinking and being a different way. So we're already precast in a role that oh my God, we should just kill them all off, because if they're born, they're just going to wreck society.
A lot of people had that attitude. Yeah, and they still.
Like, did it surprise you as you delved into this, making the film, some of the ideas that came out?
It was we researched for a very long time. We were doing a lot of research over the years, and yeah, it was exhausting too, just mentally just difficult to be reading all of this stuff all the time and digging up these horrible views, and just trying the attempts to justify them through science. So we when we started the film project, we were focusing on agriculture. We were looking at genetics, and we were looking at this current science of genetics at the time, 2005 or so, and the Human Genome Project and that sort of thing. We were looking at
and
how
the Monsantos of the world,
how that was being affected by these new discoveries about DNA. And just slowly, and we're looking at medicine, and gene therapy and these things, that just these things weren't happening the way that the biotech industry were promising, all this. And then we decided, the more we looked into it, the more we found out about eugenics. And our co-writer, Andy Kimbrell, he wrote a book called The Human Body Shop, which is about, basically about commodification of the human body in terms of blood and surrogacy and these sorts of things. And he wrote about eugenics, but even he was looking like these are things that we did not know about historically, and just felt like the more and more we learned, the more we thought that this was the story to tell when it came to genetics, because it's very specifically about personality, about who you become, who you are, what makes you who you are. And it was just clear that there was nothing behind the science of eugenics and the claims even today about genes and genetics, and it just seemed like that's where we should shift the focus in the film, and that's why it took us so long to get it done, and really focusing on the social aspects of it. And
I mean, it's crazy when you think about the American dream and the founding fathers and Thomas Jefferson, who wrote that Declaration of Independence, and talks about the idea that everybody has the right to pursue happiness, and that everybody is created equal under the eyes of the Creator, and yet were they only talking about white men were created equal under the eyes, rich or poor, but everybody else not so much.
Yeah, I mean that was really the theme that came through the more we were looking at how do we frame the film. And it's here's the American dream, or the claim about the American dream: you can be anything you want to be. And then there's this other view that was completely the opposite, saying, no, that's actually not true. It's sorted out, right before you're born. And we felt like that was the contradiction that America's always had and continues to have. Why do we have the kinds of inequality that we have now? Unless you're, really the only excuse that you can come up with is that it's an inherent problem in the people who are poor, or the people who are not doing as well, or whatever. Because when you start to admit that there are, rules right from the beginning that limit people's abilities, then it starts to get political, and then you have to actually do something about it. So it's a really easy excuse, starting from way back with the founding of the country.
It was very surprising to me, the individuals on the eugenics side. As I looked at your film and I researched a little bit more, people that you don't think about, Teddy Roosevelt, who you think about as somebody who really was a man of the people and wanted to help the people. On the other side, he was a big proponent of eugenics. And, he believed that certain feeble-minded people shouldn't exist in the world. Alexander Graham Bell, it's ironic. He thought deaf people should not, be allowed to marry and pass that on to other people, which is kind of funny in a way. I don't know why I find that so funny, but
yeah, if it's hereditary, I mean, I think that's always the.
But just the guy who has a telephone. Well, if you can't hear my telephone, you're not allowed to live. And as you were talking about through the movie, there was Nixon and Reagan and Bill Clinton, and for the most part, it was the Republicans who favored eugenics, although we had the dappling of the Roosevelts and the Clinton in there, who thought, and even he signed the bill, that it was a good idea. Yeah,
I mean, it went across the political spectrum, actually. Democrats, all parties were so different than progressives and all that. But I mean, across the board, from the earliest part of the century, people believed the science. It was really pushed so that, I mean, you had people left, right, and center who believed it all the way, and maybe still today. I don't know as much about, I don't know that that's necessarily the case today. But it's an easy thing if you really, because it's an inevitable consequence of understanding or believing in the DNA myth and the DNA story. If you believe that's what makes you who you are, then it follows that then we have to do, if you're going to attack problems or anything, that those are inherent in people. It's an inevitable. So really the science is the issue. If you believe that science, you really don't have anywhere to go. And so I think that's what we find in the film, is a lot of the people who consider themselves probably very liberal or progressive, I'd say like E.O. Wilson or James Watson, these aren't Republicans from what I understand. I actually don't know their political affiliation.
Yeah.
But, they professed to believe in some liberal ideas, especially Watson.
I mean, Watson is extremely surprising. Here's a guy, he won a Nobel Prize for finding the double helix in the DNA, and yet he makes a silly statement that, Africans, we can't really do anything about them because they're stupid, and, really they shouldn't even,
Or the policies around intelligence,
they're not as intelligent, and so they really can't be, allowed to. They shouldn't even exist, really. Statements like that from extremely bright people, like, how do they actually get away with that? And they just go, oh, Hitler wrecked it for us. If he wasn't around, then, we'd get so much further. But, he blew it. He blew it. He killed them, too quick, the wrong way. I don't know what Hitler did, but, Hitler just wrecked eugenics for us. We could have really had a good thing going here, getting, sterilizing people without their consent and doing all this stuff. Like,
well, and he never, and just to be clear, James Watson never advocated for, like you said, he was saying that Hitler got us twice. We can't do some things because of what Hitler did. And you're like, can you clarify? I think he was saying, and he believes that people should make their own decisions in a family about whether or not, how to control their.
Yeah. Well, of course, if you're wealthy and smart, then you should have children. But if you are of the poor, the masses, that, Lady Liberty says, bring us, then no, you shouldn't be having children. And why would you even try to break down society by introducing your spawn into, for the greater good? You should not have children. I mean, that's the idea.
I believe that, it's really, and I mean, there's no proof, and that's what we try to get to in the film, is that there's no proof that, excuse me, anything like poverty or the inability to do anything, even intelligence, being this claim that you'll see every other week in the news that they've discovered some sort of intelligence genes. When they're pushed, they admit that they haven't found the genes.
I think it was Augustine Fuentes. He said that if you look at a gene, you can't tell if it's a black gene or a white gene. You can't tell if it's smart or stupid or pretty or ugly or disabled or whatever. Like it doesn't, you don't know. It doesn't go to a class. And so it's just a gene. It's just,
and even the gene concept itself is what we raise questions about in the film. It's like this idea of the Mendelian gene that codes for a trait, and that they've discovered that Mendelian gene was DNA. That's what we believe. That's what's taught in all the schools. And this idea that you can pass on a trait like something like intelligence or the penchant for, you know, math or any kind of thing like that. Excuse me, that you would be able to pass that on to your children. People still believe that, and that's what that myth says, and there's no proof of that. And that's
there's no proof of that. And you get into those designer babies. Like, you know, let's have a baby and let's have her have blue eyes and be really pretty and but smart and really good at math, and let her be a fast runner, and maybe she'll be in the Olympics and all of that stuff. And people are designing their children and playing at God. And when you realize that you're not God, and I don't know if they ever did realize that, but some of those folks in the film, but we're such an delicate, intricate, you know, entity. Like, to even mix into that is so scary to me that people would do that. And I know that you know that from your radio shows, because your radio shows, you know, center on the food and all of that stuff about us mixing it up. And wow, yeah, the danger of that. Look at us now. We're looking at rice that puts crap in our stomachs, and you know, all kinds of the corn and everything. All of our food is genetically modified, and what it's going to do to us in the future of us. And
excuse me, I've got a compliment. Actually, just one note about the food. You know, the biotech industry would like us to believe that everything is genetically modified because it makes it look like they've succeeded in their effort to do that. In actuality, they've only been able to produce a couple crops, a couple traits that are used in the production of crops. So 85% are designed to allow huge amounts of pesticides to be sprayed on the crop. That's basically what genetic engineering is about, is as our producer Andy says, and he's done this in the Center for Food Safety is where he works, is chemical companies selling chemicals. That's what genetic engineering is about. So it's another, and that's when we started the film, it was clear these scientists don't know what they're doing when it comes.
They don't know what they're doing.
That's scary, and they haven't succeeded. If you want to call that a success, Roundup Ready crops, we don't consider it a success because it's actually produced more crops that, you know, require more pesticides. And then a couple other small traits that they've been able to work out. But
look what they did. I mean, they got rid. The bees are in jeopardy. Yeah. This year, I finally saw some monarch butterflies. They kind of came back a little bit, thank goodness. But they were gone for a little bit. You know, the bees are like, they are, you know, they're playing at things that they shouldn't play at. And the pesticide, you know, we don't know what it does to us, and we know what it does to other things. But do you really need a peach that looks like a donut? I don't. You know, like, and you get to a certain age, and my husband and I discuss this, because it's like, does the food not taste as good because we're old people now? Or is it that it just doesn't taste as good because we've played with the soil and we've played with the stuff? Yeah. Did we take the taste out of it? Yeah. And you know, I don't know.
And everything, yeah. I mean, that's what they, you know, the excuse me, the food that people know the difference when you're eating really good food from nutrient-rich soil.
Yeah.
You know, they've done a lot of propaganda to try to make us believe that that's not.
Because we want perfect food, right? We want perfect looking food, and if it has a blemish, we put it back, and yet it's the ugly fruit and vegetables that are probably the better ones for you, because you get for eating them. That must be, there's probably not enough stuff on it to kill them off, right? That's hilarious.
Yeah, so I mean, that's one of the things that we wanted to do with the film, was to raise questions about the science, like we're talking about here, and how it applies to these other realms. You know, with even with medicine, it's a whole other direction. But you know, the scary part is that they don't know what they're doing when it comes to genetic engineering, and the claim that they can create super babies who are more intelligent or any of that stuff. You know, it's dangerous for people to believe that it reinforces this notion that we actually understand heredity, which we don't, that we can control it, which we definitely can't, and reinforces the idea that who we are is driven by our genes and our DNA. And that's what we really want to do in the film, is to make sure that people understand that we're back 100 years to Mendel right now with the understanding of heredity. We really don't understand how it works at all.
No, and if you want to just take that to the nth degree, especially as it pertains to women, we're not good enough. We're never good enough.
Right.
No wonder we don't feel good enough. People keep wanting to change us and make us better. And you said, women are I love it in the film that one of the guys said, women are predisposed to be doing repetitive, stuff like washing dishes.
Not intellectual pursuits, but more
we're really good at that. Oh my gosh, that was so funny.
Yeah, it's really, and those attitudes are still there.
Yeah, go for it.
The attitudes are still there. It's really you'll see there's a really great book over here called gosh, I don't remember the name of it. I'll think of it. She's challenging a lot of the ideas about, every time you hear the word science, always beware, because people will call everything science.
Right.
And one of them is looking at the way that men and women are different. And you see it going back as far as you can go, from the early part of the century up to today. There's always some new supposed discovery about biology for women. And I think we highlighted one in the film. In the old days, they told women, you really shouldn't pursue college or higher learning, because the energy that it takes for the brain to actually process will pull energy away from the ovaries and will affect your reproductive.
Yeah. Use your brain, you can't have kids. Oh my God.
You're giving up, your ability to have children. I mean, ridiculous stuff like that. And then today, though, there's even people who are advocating for saying that boys and girls learn differently because they're inherently different in their brains, and advocating separating boys and girls in school. Boys like to run around and girls like to sit attentively in their seats. I mean, this is some of the nonsense that they're putting out there, and actually saying that they have science behind it. And this woman, I'll think of it and I'll email you on the website, who challenges all this. She gathers all of these studies and all the debunking and puts it all together in a very fascinating.
That's hilarious. But it reminds me of I can't remember the name of the movie, but about, her name was Mrs. Johnson, and the black lady that helped the astronaut get to the moon and back. So not only is she black, but she's female, super smart at math, right?
Oh, that film, right? I know, I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, it's amazing. And she's an amazing, I think she's like in her 80s or 90s today, but she worked at NASA. Her brain was a computer. She just figured out how to get them home, and nobody else had figured it out. So you got a woman doing math who could do what a man couldn't do, and get the astronaut back home from the flight to the moon. So how is that? Amazing. We can't think better. Like, what? We just think, maybe we do think differently. I think that we think broader, and I think women are just able to think more than men are at the same time. So we're able to think multiple thoughts at the same time. I do believe that, because
that's, and it's almost sort of like one of those I want to think of like the anecdotal kind of thing, because I know a lot of women who don't think that way. So every time you try to pin down something, men are like this, women are like this. There's so many complete opposite, examples.
Yeah, it's true. But studies, I love the studies, because the studies are 27 people, but or 100 people out of billions on the planet.
Very suspect. In fact, if you look at some of the claims about genes for, they claim to have found genes for cheating on your spouse or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
Monogamy or whatever. And when you read it, it's actually, the studies are on prairie voles. It's not a human study. They say they've studied prairie voles, and they've discovered that somehow determined
that was the other part.
On another one, and they translated over to humans.
That was the other one in the film that as far as DNA genes go, our genes are similar to a tomato and a mouse. Like they have the same as we do. Exactly. And other vegetables are even higher than us. And so, what makes us so smart? I mean,
that's their whole theory. And they'll hem and haw about this and equivocate around it. Sorry, the garbage truck's in here. But they'll say, that's okay. Well, we thought that we'd have millions of genes at first because we're so complex, and then the more they started looking, the more they realized, okay, well, maybe not millions of genes, but at least this many, 100,000 was what they all landed on, and ends up we have as many as a fly.
Yeah.
Or, like you said, Pinot Noir grapes have like 40,000 genes, and we have about, quote unquote, genes, and we have about less than
27 or something.
So, and they can't explain it. They say, oh, well, our genes just do more than those genes, but it's like, no, they're actually the same exact stretches of DNA, or similar enough that you can't call it a separate gene. So what's happening? And then they say, well, it's really the regulatory systems. So it's not really the genes. And so there's all sorts of theories right now. Nobody really knows. I think, at least from what I can tell, everybody has a new theory about how we are the way we are, and how you can find it in the DNA. Not necessarily, and I think a lot of scientists, of course, are looking at it from a purely scientific point of view. So I don't believe that all geneticists or any, but
no, that they're not all
eugenicists or even believe that our characteristics necessarily are determined by DNA.
But it interests me too, because I, as you were just talking there, I was thinking, religious-wise, are these? Did you find out anecdotally, because it wasn't in the film? Are they Christians? Are those guys Christians? Like, do they think that there's a God, or are they Darwinisms? Like,
oh, you're talking about like James Watson?
Like, like, are they Christians? Do they go to church? Do they believe in God? Because if they believed in God, then it's like, God created us. Like, so
well, I think it runs the gamut. I think I believe that James Watson, and I'm not sure about you, Wilson, but I don't think they're religious people. Whereas Francis Collins, who believes in the science of DNA, he also eschews this whole idea of, or he doesn't believe in this idea that genes determine everything about who we are. When you start getting about intelligence, he'll warn, that this is the head of the NIH, but he's very much locked into the DNA and gene myth, and how far he would take it in terms of behavior. We'd have to check with him right now. But Watson and Wilson, I think they're, from what I understand now, religion is not something that they ascribe to. But I think the main thing that I would love people to understand and see in this film, and we couldn't get into it enough with Watson and Wilson, is that they're coming from an ideological point of view and fitting the science in. Just the very thing that they accuse progressives and liberals of doing when it comes to critiquing that science.
right.
And it's really just the opposite. They're actually coming from an ideological point of view, Darwin, like you said, these beliefs in science from way back that actually, guided the way that they actually believe things work. And they'll deny that it's ideological, but it really is.
Yeah. I wish I wrote it down. I can't find my notes. The guy who actually started eugenics, at the end of his life, he had seen this woman who was dying of stomach cancer or something back. It was like way back, like 1800s or something like that. She took a trip to Lourdes to the waters, and he saw a complete and miraculous recovery, and he couldn't believe it. And so he watched it a few more times. He stayed around that area, and he looked at other miracles that had happened. Somebody who was blind and could see, and so at the end of his life, he changed his mind about it. And
oh, really? And who was this? I didn't know about
this
that.
was the guy. I think it was the guy who actually started eugenics. Who was the father of it.
Well, let's see, Francis Galton, would it be?
It was Galton. I think it was Galton.
Interesting. I definitely want to read more about that.
I'm pretty sure I read that. And so, yeah, he had seen this. And so when he died, he believed in God and decided that, yeah, you know what, like, we could have killed those people, but miracles happen. So.
Yeah, I think, and Darwin comes up a little bit in the film. We didn't really get into it enough, but he, people say Darwin wasn't a social Darwinist, and that's a lot of people will claim that. And he didn't advocate for sterilization or eugenics in that sense. I mean, Galton, which was his cousin, I believe, Galton and some others were the ones who were really pushing the larger, and not necessarily forced sterilization, I think, but this was really about believing that, like you said, people who have certain characteristics shouldn't be reproducing children, that kind of thing. And Darwin believed that, he he was stuck into, now the quote unquote genes hadn't been discovered yet. He didn't know about Mendel at the time, which they were actually contemporaries.
Yeah.
But he really did see and believe that our biology determined who we are. He just didn't know the mechanism. What is it? And and probably had a more complex view than we do even now about how biology works. But the end result would have been the same. And I think this idea that he didn't believe that it applied to humans and only applied to the natural world is definitely an error. If you read, all you have to do is read The Descent of Man, which people apparently don't ever want to read. They want to read this other book, but The Descent of Man he makes it really clear. So I think it's important that people understand that about Darwin as well.
Russell Means I don't know if he was, I guess it was a film of Russell Means or a news broadcast of Russell Means in your film. And he's head of the Lakota Nation. He died, I guess. He was head of the Lakota Nation, but he talked about, was it 40,000 Native women were sterilized? Is that what he said?
When he was being interviewed with, he was actually on there with Marlon Brando, interestingly, on an NBC interview with Tom Brokaw. And he was trying to point out that 40% of childbearing age women at the time had been sterilized.
40%. Wow.
His claim at the time. And, we did a lot of research into this. And as you can see in the film, in the Nixon era, we call it era,
yeah.
It was about 4 to 6 years around the Nixon time. There were almost, I think it was 500,000 people across the United States who had been either forcibly sterilized without their knowledge, or coerced into it. And that was obviously one of the biggest shocks, and you don't hear that.
You don't hear about it. What was the woman's name? I wish I don't know why I can't remember her name. I had it a moment ago. The black woman who in your film. What was her name?
Elaine Riddick.
Yeah, Elaine. Yeah. So Elaine had been raped. She was pregnant. Her mother didn't read, and here they come along and they go, oh, like you're stupid and you can't read and you're this and you're that. So did they take her baby away, or did she get to raise her son?
She was able to
raise her son, but they sterilized her. They forced her mother. So what they did was they forced these people to be sterilized. Otherwise, we're going to take away your food stamps or your money or your health, whatever we're giving you. We're going to take your assistance away from you. That was Nixon, right? I think he did that.
Well, Nixon. So the Nixon administration. I mean, unlike the early days with Harry Laughlin and some of the people in the United States, and Supreme Court Justice who said, yes, people could be forcibly sterilized, and treated it as if it were like vaccination, he said. When it came to the Nixon administration, what they did was, after the Great Society, they were trying to attack the Great Society programs.
Oh, yeah. He did the Planned Parenthood.
But he did like the programs that allowed poor people to get access to birth control, and which is a good thing, people have access to birth control. But one of the things that they did was they put out a memo that said that government funds could be used for sterilization for people who might want it, which is also a good thing. If people want to go through that procedure and not have children anymore and choose to do that, that's fine. But what didn't happen, there was one man who we highlight in the film who warned that this could be used in a bad way in these small clinics across the country where there's no oversight on a federal level. Nobody's really doing any oversight. And he put together guidelines that said, you can't have coercion, people under 18 couldn't be sterilized, all of these very important guidelines that would make sure that it was not abused and that people wouldn't be manipulated or coerced or sterilized without their knowledge and that kind of thing. And that's exactly what happened, is that the Nixon administration did not send those guidelines to these clinics. They got printed, they got put into a warehouse, and never distributed to any of these clinics across the country. And so we highlight this story in the film, and I mean, it's shocking. And so, people say, well, it wasn't really Nixon, ordering the sterilization of people like that kind of thing. But when they were asked, why didn't you distribute these guidelines? Because there are a lot of people, as we know, who were, these doctors and nurses deciding for themselves who is worthy of reproducing, who aren't. It was basically leaving it up to them because they weren't bound by any guidelines. And the Nixon administration said, well, it suited our political purposes
Yeah.
to suppress these guidelines. Never explained what that meant, but what could it mean? You know, we don't speculate as to what they meant, but all we know is what the results were.
Yeah, and you know, Elaine, I'm going to come back to Elaine's story again because it's so tragic in that nobody asked her what's happened to you. Why didn't you go to school, and why haven't you been going and you're malnourished?
She was doing really well in school, actually. That was one of these.
She was doing well in school. That's right. She was doing well in school, and
being bullied all the time.
but they could have said, how did you get pregnant? But nobody asked. They just thought she was promiscuous, and
she was scared. The guy who raped her said he'd kill her.
Of course she was scared. She was 14 years old. And to take away somebody's reproduction ability at 14 it's reprehensible what they did. And I saw an interview with Watson, who said that what they should do is just, if we offered them $1,000, they'll get sterilized. They'll get sterilized. And then, when they get to old age, then we'll give them, a little bit of extra money every week for for doing it. He goes, for God's sakes, he goes, you could probably give them a transistor. They do it in India. They'll sterilize themselves for a transistor.
That. Oh, thank you for reminding me of that.
It's
horrible.
He's a horrible person.
Francis Crick, people don't know about Francis Crick was one of the worst eugenics. I mean, in terms of, he also said that too, that we should offer.
Well, they were partners, right? Frick and Watson were partners. They founded that double helix together, and they were really, gosh, his thinking is disgusting.
His, Crick actually advocated for the separation of identical twins at birth to allow for studies to happen. So basically bribing the mother. I don't think he ever said do it without their permission. So, but, talk them into it basically, and how important it was for science that they give up one of their twins to be raised elsewhere and to be studied and tracked. Actually, there's a new film about I think it's 3 Identical Strangers, which I've got some issues around the science that they talk about with twin studies and everything, but that happened with these triplets. They were separated and then looked at and studied over time, and that he realized that that's the. I mean, I still think it's a little bit ridiculous to think that you could actually determine anything by doing that, because the influences that each of us have throughout our lives are such a multitude, that the idea that you can actually determine things and watch and someone growing up and decide that you could see how much percentages of their personality came from genes versus the environment. I mean, the whole thing is just kind of a big joke in my view, that we can actually understand those things on that level. But yeah, Crick is one of the worst. And there's a lot of history, his own, we have him quoted on tape there, that, raising questions about shouldn't we have an inherent, a test for children when they're born as to whether or not they should stay alive.
Oh my gosh. I know, it's awful. It's awful.
He's quite a character.
I had the very good fortune of interviewing, oh my God, I hate getting old. Oh gosh, it's gonna come. Anyway,
wiser.
We have another scientist who talks about who talks about imaginal genes, that in our body, and so he said that if you adopted a female child and you put her into a household where the women all get breast cancer, she will get breast cancer. So it's not even, it's environment and heredity, right? Which is interesting. She has nothing to do with that family except be adopted into their environment. But as you put women in the same house, their periods, they cycle the same. They eventually cycle up. So I mean, there are interesting things that happen. But Bruce Lipton, Dr. Bruce Lipton, sorry, Bruce. But if you have these imaginal cells in your body, you can tell your cells to go and reproduce and become something else that you need, like cancer killers or whatever. He totally believes that you can do that. And he was the guy who invented stem cell. So I believe him. I think it's probably true if you have that kind of mindset that you can do that.
Who knows? I mean, that's the kind of stuff it starts to get out there where you're thinking, well,
sure,
what kind of influence do we have over our own bodies and our own minds and all that kind of thing? And I mean, I guess there are ways you can try to measure that sort of thing, but at this point, we know so much about the environmental influences on what makes us who we are.
Right.
On our, the studies that they've done even for health,
nature versus
health
nurture,
issues,
right?
all that kind of stuff. There's so much evidence. There's overwhelming evidence that the environment shapes our personalities, our lives, our circumstances, whether or not we end up in what zip code does this and that. I mean, I wanted to have a website that said how many more studies do we need.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So in a way, it's
Exactly.
like, why aren't we focusing on that?
But you look at those children that were left in the orphanages in Eastern Europe, who, they said they were retarded or they, mentally challenged, today's version, but they weren't held and loved and stimulated. And that's what happens to children who aren't held and loved and stimulated. And so, like, if they had had a different upbringing or a different beginning to their life, and somebody had cuddled them and did all that nourishing stuff that our babies need, they wouldn't be challenged. That wouldn't have happened to them. And so it is definitely, environment and upbringing, and where, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's undeniable. And there are some people who will still argue, I think Steven Pinker is one of them, that, that really the first 6 years doesn't shape people as much as environmentally, as much as people claim. It's a very odd thing to say, and I can't imagine that someone studying psychology would ever claim that. But
I mean, they say our personalities form by the time we're 5, right?
I mean, you could probably go back in your life and be like, what kind of influences made you who you were, and there's a lot of mystery too. I mean, that's the other thing about heredity, is the fact that it is a mystery to us still. That, people going into biology and the sciences, I think it's a great time to be there.
Yeah.
If you can go in with this understanding that this stuff is not sorted out, that they don't know what they're talking about, it's a really exciting time for students for biology, who can go in with an actual open mind, instead of coming at it from an ideological point of view, whether progressive or whatever,
Right.
If you really are a scientist and you really want to focus, this is a pro-science
And you
film.
don't care where it ends up. You just go for the truth.
It's really about looking at science. Is supposed to be about checking things, proving them wrong or not. And, that discussion needs to happen more than ever about DNA and genes, because there's a lot of denial happening about what's actually understood and what the claims are,
So here's the other thing I was thinking after I watched your film. It was kind of exciting, but you've got Ancestry.com and all these different websites up now that are kind of urging people, check your DNA, see who you came from, see where you actually were. And there's a nefarious side to me that goes, why do they want to know that? Maybe I might be curious, but where does that information go? And what is it, like, who's going to end up with that? And they go, oh, you came from that, so maybe we should start targeting that group of people or that group of people. That's kind of scary, really, when you think about it. Because
the gathering of DNA we've known with data banks, with crime databases and things like that. I mean, it's dangerous because of, I'm not worried about what they're actually going to find with the DNA and what it's going to say. I'm worried what they're going to claim that they found with the DNA.
Yeah.
I mean? So it's like they can say, well, you have a crime gene, and we have your DNA, and it's right there, and this study says that there's a crime gene, and therefore,
you're a criminal.
Prevent, I mean, those scenarios aren't, that's what people should be most concerned about, I think. And also, even though there are some guideline or some legislation that protects people in terms of insurance. So, if you have insurance that, if you have health insurance and this predisposed to certain things, these claims you can be predisposed to breast cancer, any of that stuff.
Sure.
Is also nonsense when it comes to DNA. There's a lot of really bad science around that we're hearing about breast cancer and these other supposedly genetic conditions where they're claiming the genes are involved. There's some legislation that protects people from being discriminated against by health insurance companies, but how long is that legislation going to hold on? We know with the Trump administration, things can come in and turn things around really quickly when it comes to laws and that kind of thing. So I think people should be very concerned. One thing about the Ancestry test, what we're trying to point out, we get into it a little bit in the film, but not a lot, is that it reinforces the notion of race, and it reinforces this idea that race is a biological reality instead of the construction that we know it is. And people, someone quoted Jonathan Marks. Excuse me. Jonathan Marks says that if they really wanted to understand, people saying scientists are going to go and look at DNA and try to map some sort of ancestral thing. They would start with in a grid and go from here to here to here to here to here. But they didn't. You know, they already had groups of people in mind. And then they're going to go find those groups,
Yes.
check the DNA, and start looking for commonalities. So
Yeah.
you can't, you know, so you're already starting from this notion that there are groups of people that are distinct in that way. And that's just not the case. And Augustine Fuentes gets into that. It's a great, if it's still on the web, I don't know if I can find the link. Nicholas Wade, who wrote a book everyone should be warned about. New York Times reporter debated Augustine Fuentes on a web debate.
Nice.
And they get into this, and Nicholas Wade saying, hey, the science is there to say that there are separate races of people. And Augustine was like, no, it's not there. And it's a really good, Augustine does a great job of laying out why that's not the case. And it's very,
I really liked Fuentes. He was so impressive. You know, it's kind of interesting. I guess I got to wrap up soon, but it's kind of interesting to think that after the 20s, when the pursuit of happiness became the pursuit, like the depression happened, right? And that became the kind of the pursuit of money, that all of this kind of came back out, because it's like, you know, greed. It seemed like greed and avarice is kind of behind it in a little bit, in a way.
Yeah, I really think it justifies a huge amount of that kind of stuff. You know, I mean, we talk about social Darwinism as a concept, and I think that is one of the things that, if you look at our society in the United States, it's about, you know, you're on your own. A lot of it. I mean, obviously not all of it, but I mean, I think the prevailing sort of feeling right now, especially the Trump administration and people who back that, which is way too many people, obviously.
Scary.
No, you're on your own. We're all, you know, if you can't make it, it's your fault, and all this kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And the legislation that translates into that, which is cutting, you know,
all social programs,
lunch programs for kids. I mean, it's just
lunch programs for kids. Why would you cut lunch programs for kids?
I mean, you wouldn't believe, and disability. I mean, all of the things that they've been trying to slash, and they've been doing it since the Great Society, which made a lot of gain. Yeah. And the people who are against the Great Society, not just say just Republicans, because there may be plenty of Democrats too and independents, but the idea was cut, and then leave people to be. Charles Murray, put him in there. He's the one person in the film, I think, that everybody can really see how this whole idea manifests itself when it comes to politics, because it's all about, he wants to cut every kind of social program, and he'll throw in and do a basic income. You know, so don't believe the hype around some of the stuff. So he says, yeah, I believe in universal basic income, and everybody should, but cut everything else. No workers' comp, no nothing, like no government programs. And then everybody's supposedly on some sort of equal footing to move forward in life. And then we'll see
survival of the fittest then. Yeah, dog eat dog. Yeah, dog eat dog.
That's what I think is a dangerous thing right now.
I do too.
Pushed, and it's an easy thing to kind of, to default to when.
I mean, you have the working poor.
Inequality, you know? Right?
You look at homelessness. People who are homeless, there's a lot of people who are still working who are homeless. They go to their jobs every day. They can't afford the rent. You know, they can't afford what's happening in their cities. And if you go around the United States, I mean, you know, I've traveled around a bit enough to know that, you know, there's certain areas, you know, California, real estate prices are for nothing. I mean, you pay like big bucks for like nothing. And then you go to Kentucky and you can get a beautiful home for $160,000 or something, right?
But then you can't get a job.
Yeah. So the disparity is like crazy. Yeah. But, you know, I mean, people, social impact is, you know, a big thing for me. And I guess in a way I'm kind of a socialist, but it's not that I want to give handouts. It's not about giving handouts, it's about giving help, you know, hand ups and helping people find their way. So, you know, you expect people to do volunteer work, even if you want to give them some money. Like, they don't have to sit on their butt and do nothing. There's other things that they can do, right?
About, you know, jobs, it's always this kind of thing about being productive in society, and
right.
You have a job, and it's like, but what about like meaningful work? What about meaningful, you know, engagement in life? And that's what we have to get back to. It's like, it's not about just like getting somebody to get a job to produce something so they can eat and then eventually die. I mean, that's basically our society.
Yeah. It's like, we're not here just to do that. Yeah.
If you go back to the Great Society and you look at Sergeant Shriver, who's a hero, an unsung hero,
Yeah, he is.
he's amazing. You know, and Johnson too. Johnson should get credit.
Johnson,
For,
I just love Johnson. Yeah, he became my hero.
and they were modeled at the time. They knew that the only way they were able to sell those was to involve private and public funds together. And so it was a Republican model back then, just like the healthcare bill originally with them.
Obama.
But you know, they said, well, it's not about handing out anything. In fact, none of those things were cash handouts,
Right.
quote unquote welfare that I believe the Republicans have sort of reframed. Back in the day, the Great Society programs were about people helping each other and working in their communities and having opportunities. And it's across the board. It was very popular with Republicans. They're the ones who are asking for more money for the Great Society. And we've got Shriver on tape talking about this. He goes into a hearing and he comes back out. He's like, look, these are successful and people love them. And why aren't we doing this more? And then you start to see a decline with Nixon and then Reagan. And I would say even Clinton.
I'm shocked at Reagan and Clinton.
Yeah.
I'm just shocked at
Reagan wouldn't be too shocking, but Clinton, he slashed huge amounts of, as we know. A lot of people with the welfare reform bill was just one of the worst legislations that ever happened from under a Democratic president. And we're seeing the results now. And 20 years later, you know, no children and living in poverty as a direct result. They've looked at it, you know. So I just think I agree with you. I mean, I think that we can't fall into this idea that people are destined to be, you know.
You don't know who's going to come out of what. Like you just, how many amazing things were killed off by Hitler, you know, that could have been in the world today. And you look at things like that. I just have to look at that. And you think one person's not important. You have no idea who that person could have been or was supposed to be.
And everybody who has an opportunity right now who are, you know, being told over and over again that they're not worthy, that they're never going to make it, you know, why are you even bothering? They're trying to cut Head Start programs because they just don't think they're actually going to help these children who are, you know, not. It's really, really dangerous, really scary.
You know, I had a math teacher who told me I was stupid. I had a math teacher who said, you can't do it. And I believed him. I believed him. You know, girls are stupid at math. And for a long time I go, oh, I'm a girl. I'm stupid at math. I'm really good at English, but I'm really stupid at math. And then one day, you know, I was older and it didn't bother me so much. And I was trying to learn something. I go, I'm not stupid at math. That guy was a real idiot. I got rid of that rule that he gave me that I was stupid. And it was like, wow, if everybody had, you know, that opportunity, instead of being told something negative, something positive that allowed them to thrive instead of, you know, die off, it would be the world would be a very different place. And I know that because my dad told me I could do anything, and I believe him.
Exactly. I know my parents too. I was lucky that way.
Me too. And you know, I have a stepsister who said, oh, you're so lucky you had your dad. Look, you can do whatever. I go, but you lived with him longer than I did. So you could have modeled your behavior after him. You could have, you know, looked at that and go, what does he do? And because as a coach, you know, I go, model that behavior, pretend as if. Eventually you will do it if you want to. It really is a mindset. If people want to do something, they can do it, right? You didn't know that you could be a filmmaker, but there you are doing a wonderful work, doing a fantastic job at it. I know we're almost out of time. Tell me what's next. Oh, well, let's talk about how we're going to get this or how they're going to watch this film. And then I want you to tell me what's next on your agenda. Is this going into universities right now? Or are they going to be watching it, setting up groups?
We do have the film Bullfrog Films. You can get the film through Bullfrog educational films. You can get it also for community groups who want to sign up and show it in their community and have a screening. You can get a license for like, I don't know, $100 or something like that. You know. And then we are premiering the film September 28th through October 4th in New York at the Cinema Village in Lower Manhattan. So we'll be screening the film all week for all the New York people. Please come out and see the film. And then we'll be releasing it on DVD October 2nd and VOD. So
do you have a site? Do you have something that you want people to go and actually become activists through watching this film? Okay, what do you want? What are they going to do?
I mean, well, definitely, and that's what we're building out our website to give opportunities for people to connect to each other in ways that we can address certain things. But our website is A Dangerous Idea-Film.com, and all run together. And you'll see on there, I think the main thing is really, I know it sounds typical of someone who's pushing the film, but to watch the film, because I think that's the first thing, and then to pass those ideas on with other people, because undermining this whole ideology and this whole viewpoint, especially the Trump administration is a perfect example of, and we have Trump in the film talking about this kind of thing, is to undermine it through understanding that it's not real, that this whole idea that DNA makes you what you are, all this stuff isn't real, is a real way to undermine that and to get the word out about it. That's our main message,
It's poignant when you saw that the part in the film, where the Jews came and they were turned away and then they had to go back to the gas chambers. It's like the Syrians are turned away. And, Trump, what are you doing? Like, these people, obviously, they need to come. They need to go somewhere. They need to go somewhere.
I should have mentioned that. I mean, these very relevant, issues like immigration. I mean, you've got Trump, calling Mexico,
they're not giving us our best.
And it was the same thing.
Criminals. Well, they're not sending
you. The same thing back in the day when they were blocking other people from coming into the country. It's very dangerous.
But now Trump hates Canada, so
you guys are a big target now.
Now we're personas non grata.
Yeah, but he's fine with you guys coming into the country. It's like he's got certain groups that he's targeting.
Yeah.
So it's dangerous. But yeah, so I think going to the website, coming out to see the film, and then getting out on DVD, VOD coming up, and then we are, we'll be releasing short clips and things like that, things that aren't in the film on specific topics. So if anybody wants to learn more when they watch the film about a certain thing, it's like, please give me some direction on what
if you're outraged,
archive to hand off to you.
If you're outraged by watching it, do you want them to make sure they go out and vote?
Sure. Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
policies
definitely.
that actually support the kinds of, depending on what your political views are. I mean, you could be a Republican and still vote for the right things that
right.
actually urge the type of thing we're talking about.
Yeah.
If that legislation's even up there for.
Is there anything else they could do or should do right now, or you'll put some stuff up there?
I mean, I think, like I said, I think it's really about passing it on to other people, because once you understand that this stuff isn't real, everything starts to change. You start to watch TV differently. You start to talk to children differently. You start to think, well, boys and girls, it's important that we don't separate boys and girls in that way and try to tell them that they're different in the way they're this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Or people about IQ and believing in all this, nonsense. IQ in and of itself is a number. I mean, so I guess I'm just thinking that once the understanding is there, it translates into our lives in ways that are kind of unexpected. And in whatever realm that people are working in, that they can then advocate for this view if they subscribe to it as well. In a way that's actually productive.
How could you not? People.
Watch the film and then let me know. And we'd love to hear what people think.
Yeah.
And, any issues they have with it or fact checks. I mean, we're always looking for
send right to me too. I'm really excited to know what you guys think about this film once you've seen it. And what's next for you, Stephanie? What are you gonna work on?
Oh gosh, I'm just gonna get this out there. Really.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a big year.
Yeah, we're gonna really focus on this and getting a lot of community screenings going and discussions and debates and everything. And I think, one of the other focuses, I think, is the medicine aspect about genetics and medicine. And that's it's a big part of my, very, very important to me and all the research that we've done. So I'd like to kind of be working on that and chipping
That's exciting. Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I don't know what happened to our Brent, but Brent, we're sorry that you weren't able to join us.
And thank you for the wonderful review, Brent. Brent saw the film and just was very, very kind words. So
yeah, he's a great writer and he's a really, really good reviewer. Thank you everybody for joining us today who came to us live, and for those who are going to watch this a little bit later.
Thank you.
Okay, I stopped the recording.
Okay.
And I'm going to take us off Facebook Live. Hang on, let me stop streaming. Okay, we're off. Oh, no, we're